This is the Ask Faleskini podcast, where the modern economy is discussed from a skeptic's perspective. Mr. Faleskini helps you distinguish what is sustainable in our economy and what isn't. Not everything that glitters is gold, and not all mud is dirty. The podcaster Mr. Faleskini provides no-nonsense advice. He had it all, lost it all, went bankrupt multiple times, and is now attempting to come back from zero with sustainable growth. There are numerous coaches and preachers on the internet that preach about positive thinking and how life is all roses if you just care to see it that way. Well, Mr. Faleskini is definitely not one of them. We recommend you ask Faleskini to keep it real. He discusses the darker side of the current economic reality, the side that's more important for your personal and business finance. His first intention is to help you keep what you already have. Not to be a complete party pooper, Mr. Faleskini will also hint at the earning opportunities in the economy today. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please like, share, and subscribe. And now it's time to start taking notes. The mic goes to the podcaster, the one and only Mr. Faleskini.
Welcome to 2023 interview series with Ask Faleskini. We have a special guest today to start the year off with a bank, and that is the founder of New York City Podcast Network, Bruce, and I'm really excited to have it on my podcast. Just a few background info on Bruce. He started podcasting really early in 2005. And then when we all believe that podcasting will stop and that everything will be in the video, he still stopped his efforts. However, when the podcasts come back in 2014, he started again, and his New York Podcast Network is probably one of the best technologically and user interface wise platform for your podcast. So Bruce, would you be so nice and tell us a bit about how you started the project? And you're also a huge podcaster in New York, so how you came to idea to support other podcasters and not just build a platform that would support just your podcast.
Oh, thank you, Peter, for having me on your show. And it's definitely a pleasure. So it was interesting because I would have to say, probably this goes way back to college. I wanted to be a radio DJ. There was no internet yet, and there was obviously no podcasting. So I wanted to get onto the radio station as a DJ, and they were full. I loved heavy metal music at the time, and I wanted to play my favorite songs. I just couldn't get on. They were all inundated with DJs, and I went on to do other things in my college, which was in New Jersey. But the years went by, and I discovered podcasting, I think 2005, as you mentioned, and I think it just came into existence as a medium right after the Apple iPod, which a lot of people don't even know, because it goes back very far. So I figured it was definitely time for me to try to get that radio DJ thing back, right? And podcasting was the perfect way to do it. I was in the bookstore. I just heard of podcasting, but I never really understood what it was. And I saw a book by an author named Todd Cochran, who is the founder of the Blueberry Network. And I read it. It had a shiny, reflective silver cover, and it had green lettering. Okay, think about green lettering on a glossy silver cover. It just stands out among any other book. The front cover. I picked it up. I read a couple of pages, and I'm like, yeah, this is the next book I'm buying. I bought it. I learned how to podcast from that book within the week, and that was it. Now, I'm going along with my podcast, and the first podcast I started was called the Fresh Music Series. I played music in my local area of Long Island, New York. And then I realized, why and I'm a musician too, by the way. So I played my music, which is on Spotify now. This is before Spotify. And then I figured, why am I limiting my podcast or just to one podcast when I can build a whole network? Now, in my experience, there was no term called podcast network. I still feel that I'm the first person in the world that actually created that term. I coined the term podcast network. But now I found that there are hundreds of podcast networks all over the world. I don't know if that came from me, but the theory behind that was radio network. Okay. You have a radio network, a television network. It's a collection of shows. And I figure I could start a network. I can call it that, but obviously it's not TV. It's not radio. It's a digital show. So podcasting, when people ask me what a podcast really is, because a lot of people still don't know, it is in a very, very quick elevator speech of under, I'll say 10 seconds, a podcast is nothing more than a digital audio or video show. That's all it is. So now I have a network of over 800. It's wild.
Yeah, I'm really proud to be part of your network.
I'm proud to have you on it.
Thank you. I would like to know, because we're a business podcast, do you have a job, or is that your prime hustle, or is that a side hustle, New York City Podcast Network?
I go back and forth with that. Right now, I do have a job as a lead developer. You told me in my podcast that you're also a lead developer. So I'm the web developer. I have been since, believe it or not, 1995, going on 28 years, which is just it's mind-boggling how long I've been doing it for. And with that said, I built a podcast network by myself from the ground up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can tell, because it's really technically is really advanced, and it has all the features that other podcasts like Spotify and other providers don't have. So you know exactly what you need, because you're also a podcaster.
Yeah, we're obviously not as big as Spotify, but I will say this: I think we do offer a lot more than Spotify for one reason. Spotify has millions of subscribers, obviously, and they get millions of plays a day, every day. I mean, because I'm not just a podcaster. Like I said, I'm also a musician and a songwriter, and I actually just came out with a brand new song today. So I know what's going on. Spotify is great, but the thing about Spotify is that they're not really a social network for podcasters. You know, they're there. You go on, you listen to the podcast, you obviously like them, and Spotify's algorithm will keep on promoting all the podcasts that get the most likes, as well as streams and that are on playlists, right? Because they're on editorial playlists, just like music. I think, but the one thing about Spotify is that they're not really a social network. What we're trying to do is we're trying to turn our podcast network into a social network where people are going to come and like your podcast. And then when you log in, you'll get to see only those episodes that you've liked from the podcast you've liked. Actually, let me reword that. You will see the episodes of the podcast you actually liked. And we have not stopped there. I mean, we're just going to keep on going until we give people total interactivity. You know, we want total interaction, very little hands off from us, because people want that hands-on experience, and that's what we're trying to do. So,
yeah, your business model is far superior to Spotify and Apple Podcasts as far as interaction is concerned. And especially for me, the best thing was that I could, when we started talking about publishing my podcast on your network, it was that I could interact with you directly. And that I had this pleasure, and you explained everything in detail. So I think that is a huge advantage. Do you have any business aspiration? Because we are a business podcast. What are your business aspirations with this podcast network? And you mentioned we were chatting before we started recording that you are expanding globally, and that your podcast network is going to be a global network, and that you're going to have also some local networks so that people can listen to their local podcasts. So how are you planning to do that?
So really just through some really clever web development and some really good marketing itself. I'm glad you mentioned that. So we are, it's 2023, and I always said that in 2023, this is the year that we're going to become global. And I said this back in 2021. So here we are. So basically, we're called the New York City Podcast Network, and we are worldwide. We are global already, but you won't know that by the name or the content, right? So we do have podcasts from Germany, France, the UK, Canada, Australia, South Africa. I mean, we do not lock out anybody who's not from New York or even the United States. I mean, we're called New York, but we even have podcasts from almost every major city, people that live in those cities in the United States and obviously other countries. So the transition won't be that bad. My business aspiration is to be a global podcast network that will help people not only promote their own podcast, but help podcasters help podcast subscribers find those podcasts in their own countries. So we will have a podcast page for each country. There'll be a Germany page, a France page, and so forth. And this way, it's not just that, but it's also specific languages, right? There are still people out there that don't know English. I mean, I think English and Chinese are probably the two biggest languages in the world right now. And everybody I talk to knows English, right? But I personally don't know any other language, right? I've taken classes. I've taken Spanish, French, Hebrew. I've taken a lot of courses on those languages, and I still never retained them. So I'm glad that everyone else could speak English. It makes it easy for me. But I understand. We do have a podcast. We have 2 podcasts in Hebrew. We have two in French, about 5 in German. I think there's 1 in Japanese. So why not have a language page, a country page? I'm just going to keep on building. Like, that's it. My business aspiration is to never stop building and improving, because when you stop doing that, eventually the world's going to change and you're not, right? So you have to change with everybody else.
Okay. So I'm just amazed at your technical expertise and how you're really motivated about it. I would like to ask you about the business side of your podcast network. Will you go public? Do you have any aspiration to go public and be probably you will be on New York Stock Exchange, I believe.
Absolutely. That is definitely in my plan. I don't think we're ready yet. I don't believe it would be the New York Stock Exchange. I'm thinking maybe NASDAQ, but
okay,
because all the tech companies are in NASDAQ, right? So I'm thinking, I've always thought that we would be there. I don't see myself in the New York City, the New York Stock Exchange, maybe, but I think you have to be a bigger company than that. I like the same company as Facebook and Amazon, Netflix. They're all on NASDAQ, so why not?
That's good. Have you ever thought about including? We talked about NFTs earlier.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about including cryptocurrency like a loyalty program or similar into your podcast network?
Yes, especially now because we're starting to help podcasts promote themselves through Ethereum, which is probably the most popular cryptocurrency for NFTs. I mean, yes, people use Bitcoin, but I don't think Bitcoin is popular for NFTs as Ethereum. When you go on blockchain websites like OpenSea, they usually promote, I think, Ethereum and also Polygon, right? So those two cryptocurrencies are the biggest ones. And because I've seen artists, like rock bands and artists and everybody else, hip hop artists are all promoting themselves with NFTs now. I think the rock band Kiss has a lot of NFTs for their songs. Taylor Swift has NFTs. I believe, who is it? I think 50 Cent has it. So a lot of these famous people, famous artists do have NFTs. But music, when you think about it, and podcasts together are both just a piece of audio, right? One is through music and one is through spoken word usually. But the bottom line is that music and podcasts are audio. So why not have NFTs for podcast episodes? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also then you have you could build an asset or in the balance sheet of a company. So let's assume that if you would issue NFTs, you could have it in your balance sheet, and then you could have a huge balance sheet, and then it would be big enough for the New York Stock Exchange.
Yep, we do keep our books. So
yeah. So right now you're organized as a limited company, I believe.
Yes, we are.
And you're registered in New Jersey, or are you using any other jurisdictions?
No, we're registered actually in New York. So we are, and we are a corporation, so we have it in definitely. We're already, like I said, in Europe and Asia. So we just once I think once we become global, it's going to open the door for a lot more podcasters from different countries. Right? We actually do have one. I left out. We do have one in Italian as well. The person's from the podcaster is from Venice, Italy.
Okay.
So I'm losing track of all the countries, but this is all going to come together once we become global and we start building that aspect. So I think it's I'm definitely excited for the growth. I mean, we are a team of 12 people. It's not just me doing the work. I do have my director of podcaster relations, Megan Hope, who is always as active as I am. I'm the CEO, but I'm also just when you talk to a company, usually you'll never talk to the CEO. But I feel that it's important for the CEO to talk to on the same level as, let's say, your customer service techs. You know what I mean? Because to me, that shows that the company cares.
Okay, we're gonna give links to all your web pages, and you said that you have also a LinkedIn group for podcasters.
Yes,
I think that would be also of interest to our and of course for my network it would be extremely important that you let us know about the IPO and pre-IPO investments that will become available.
I look forward to that day. Like I said, I don't believe we're there yet, but I definitely am dreaming that day will come very soon. And when I say dream, I don't mean dream like a dream that'll never come true. I mean, it's definitely in the plan.
Okay. Any estimates? What year is that? When do we have to have the liquidity ready?
I don't want to give you the year just yet. I feel that once we become global, then I'll be in a better position to predict a lot of the changes that are going to come. Right now, we're undergoing a lot of development behind the scenes, obviously, and a lot of language, not the language, the actual computer languages that go behind all that. The technology has completely updated, so we have to update ourselves that way for security and things like that. Security, performance. We do have a very well-performing network for a website. I believe that I've seen a lot of podcast networks out there that do not have the level of detail that we have, but their performance is also a lot slower than us. So
what database do you use?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that to a public podcast. No, I'm not going to. I would love to, but I'm not going to, just because I don't know who's out there listening and who's got the expertise to hack a website. But we
okay. We want.
I'm always happy to talk to you offline about that.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay.
And before we close, I would really like to know how you imagine exit from this venture. Is that would you plan to sell to Spotify? Would you plan to sell to YouTube? Is there any plan for your exit when you make it big and when you go public? And how do you imagine that? And how do you imagine your retirement?
That's a really good question, Peter. And I actually, yes, I'm always thinking about going public, selling to a company who might want a network of our multitude of, definitely. I do have a few companies in mind. I will not disclose who they are just yet. There are also some individuals out there that are very well known that I'm also targeting. The one thing that I do want to do, and another business aspiration of our network, and we've already started, is to get the celebrity podcast onto our network. There are a lot of actors doing podcasts out there right now, mostly not musicians, but definitely a lot of actors out there who have a lot of followers on their podcast. And a lot of them come to mind. Like, I'll give you a few. I don't know if people know, but Ali Wentworth, and she has one called Ask Ali. She was on Seinfeld. She was in the Soup Nazi commercial. Are you a Seinfeld fan, Peter?
I'm a huge Seinfeld fan.
Okay, so
more old works.
Okay, do you know who Ali Wentworth was? Do you know what character she played in Seinfeld?
No.
It was the one. So she was in the Soup Nazi. She was the schmoopy girl.
Yeah, I can't put it together.
She's got a really big podcast. Also, another big podcast out there is the Armchair Expert, Dax Shepard, who just became an actor a couple of years ago, and he's in a lot of movies now. He was on The Ranch with Ashton Kutcher. That's on Netflix. He was in Chips with Mark Wahlberg. So he was becoming and he's an up and coming actor as well. And he's got a really huge podcast. So yeah, we're reaching out to those type of people as well. And I feel that once we get those podcasters on our network, then we're going to be in a better situation to be able to sell to anybody, right? So that's one of my biggest goals, is to get all of these people onto our
Okay,
network.
do you have any special deal for them? For example, Joe Rogan got $250 million a year deal. Is there something you are looking to offer to these famous podcasters, or you have something else in mind for them?
Well, I don't have $250 million to give to somebody, to anybody. I actually thought Joe Rogan was $100 million, so maybe it went up, and I just was living under a rock for the last year on his podcast. But either way, it's really not. I mean, if I had the money, yeah, I'd love to. But I'm more about the exposure. I want to give exposure to as many podcasts out there. What we're always trying to think about is, how do we take hundreds of podcasters and promote them all equally? And that is something that I'm always thinking of. It's not something that I haven't accomplished already. So the wheels are always turning. I'm always thinking about those ways, either through a sharing tool. I mean, everybody now is about sharing, right? Everything, every website, every social network has a sharing tool. So we've added that 2 years ago, and we track all of this too. It's not just the tools that we created. We also track everything, because we want to reward podcasters who get the most interaction on our network. We track data on views, listens, downloads. Even when somebody logs into the podcast, we now have the leaderboard. So if you vote on somebody's episode, we track that as well. And we also track shares. So we think that the leaderboard is another big part of our network, because I notice in our Google Analytics that we get a lot of traffic to it. People want to know who is the top performing podcast. So we reward those people. But what we're doing is we're now starting to revamp the whole algorithm behind the leaderboard because we want to change that. We've only had the leaderboard since 2022. So it hasn't even been a year yet. And I'm starting to revamp that, right? The leaderboard is going to be basically a weighted algorithm on all these different pieces of interaction. And whoever gets the most votes, the most shares, the most plays, it's going to be a certain percentage. And we're going to work that out. And that is going to make podcasters help us market our network even better. So I'm always thinking about how to make it better for not just us, but our members, our podcasters. It's huge.
Okay, I have one or two more questions before we finish.
Sure.
Do you have a CFO in your 12 people team or not yet?
We have a finance manager.
Okay.
So we don't have a CFO yet. We do have a marketing manager as well. So right now we have managers. The marketing manager handles the social media and handles the blogs and the blogging. We do have content writers. I'm the only upper level management person. And then we have Megan, who's also she does podcaster relations. I mean, you can't have a podcast network as big as ours and not have a director of podcaster relations. So you need that type of team too.
Yeah. So no treasury and just you're keeping it at the bare minimum, if I understand. So it's all about technical advantages right now.
Yeah, I mean, no, we look to grow our staff. Right now, we don't need a bigger staff just yet, but when we do, everybody's busy. We do have people who look at the stats, who analyze the stats for us, help look at who's actually doing the content. We have various content writers who help us write all types of pages and blog posts and things like that. So it's constant animal. It's a living creature for me. It's never going to die because I won't let it. Knock on wood. Hopefully, I won't die anytime soon. But as long as I'm alive, the podcast network is going to be alive. That's all I can say. I have no. How can I say this? I have no plans of failing. Put it that way.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, Bruce. Thank you very much for being a guest.
Thank you, Mr. Faleskini, for this outstanding podcast. And thank you for listening to the Ask Faleskini podcast until the end. Mr. Faleskini would love to hear your feedback in the comments. And don't forget, if you want to know, ask Faleskini or listen to the Ask Faleskini podcast. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.